setting a fresh course. Newly elected Speaker Paul Ryan vows to implement change. Carson on top. New polls affirm retired neurosurgeon Ben Carson as the GOP frontrunner. Close to the Pope. Jason Calvi talks with a Central American cardinal who advises the Holy Father. And treasured memory. We visit a Pennsylvania family directly touched by the kindness of Pope Francis. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, November 3rd, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. The new Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, moves to clean up Congress. He vows to help his House colleagues lead the country in a new direction. Wyatt Goolsby is on Capitol Hill tonight with that report.
Brian, Speaker Paul Ryan says he's going on the offensive with his new job, saying today that he and his fellow lawmakers will, quote, tackle problems before they tackle us.
I really truly believe that the next handful of years will determine what kind of country we're going to have for a long time. We are in a generational defining moment.
Today, Speaker Paul Ryan promising the country changes are coming in how the House operates.
What I am concerned about is making sure that we do our jobs here. We were elected by our constituents to represent their interests here in Congress, and that's what we're going to do.
His comments come less than a week after he was sworn in as House Speaker. Already he seems to be cleaning house, taking down a portrait of former Speaker Dennis Hastert, who recently pleaded guilty to a hush money scheme. Paul's election is a welcome change for many Republicans and Democrats. Some say his predecessor, John Boehner, didn't do enough to unify his own party. Today, House Republicans seem divided between Tea Party hardliners and pragmatists.
Anybody who tells me that we need every penny and every one.
And Republican voters are also divided. After last week's CNBC debate, several campaigns met to voice their concerns about media bias. On Monday, President Obama fired back at the GOP hopefuls.
Every one of these candidates say, Obama's weak. Putin's kicking sand in his face. When I talk to Putin, he's going to straighten out. And then it turns out they can't handle a bunch of CNBC moderators.
A jab Republicans will likely respond to later this week. With so much division within the GOP, Speaker Paul Ryan appears to be one of the only clear-cut leaders in his party. That's especially noting the fact that there's still a presidential election a full year away. Brian?
Wyatt Goolsby on Capitol Hill. Thanks, Wyatt. Jeb Bush pushes hard to show that he still has a shot at winning the White House. The rollout of his new slogan, Jeb Can Fix It, have some people wondering if it's the country or his campaign he's trying to fix. Bush's campaign designed his multi-city Fix-It tour to focus on what the candidate calls his proven conservative record. He's looking for a boost in consistently weak poll numbers. Another poll shows Ben Carson topping Donald Trump as the Republican presidential frontrunner. A new national poll from NBC News and the Wall Street Journal shows Carson leading Trump 29 to 23%. Now, there is a margin of error of plus or minus 4.9 percentage points. Rounding out the top five in this poll are Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, and Jeb Bush. The poll surveyed likely GOP primary voters both before and after last week's debate hosted by CNBC. Diana Banister is Executive Director of Citizens for the Republic, with the presidential election exactly a year away now in this off-year election. Who is going to lead this party forward?
Well, it's remarkable, Brian, because I think we have the best slew of candidates we've seen in many, many years, in that they are accomplished governors, they're accomplished senators, they have done great things in office. So any one of these guys and the one woman could lead this country, and I think very well, if they were elected.
Paul Ryan, of course, was a running mate for Mitt Romney last time around. What do you think of him in his new role as House Speaker?
Well, I'm excited. I'm enthusiastic because he took leadership role immediately. He went on the Sunday shows, he went on offense, he did his press conference today, and he's actually communicating our message, which is the key. People want somebody who's going to be a fighter, who's going to actually promote their issues to the American people and the issues that he believes in and the Republican Congress. So I think that is a very encouraging sign.
Dr. Ben Carson has taken over the front-runner role from Donald Trump. Could he emerge as a leader?
He could emerge as a leader, and it's going to be interesting to see how he handles it, because being a neurosurgeon, he's not used to the spotlight, A. He's not used to the media criticism, which he will get, and soon. Donald Trump already went out and was criticizing him again today, and all the other candidates are probably going to start doing that as well, as they've done with Donald Trump himself. So,
and that candidate revolt against the debates, that fell apart last night.
It fell apart last night, and unfortunately it was Ben Carson who kind of instigated that little revolt, and several of the other candidates said they weren't going to sign the letter to the networks to lay down the law, so to speak, as to what is going to be happening in the next debate. So it's pretty much fallen apart to this point.
So now up to the RNC. We'll see what happens there. Diana Banister, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Brian. Good to be with you.
Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. 2 U.S. officials say American satellite systems detected heat around a Russian passenger plane before it crashed in Egypt on Saturday. One of those officials says the heat could mean anything from a bomb blast aboard the jet to a jet engine malfunction and explosion. However, the information essentially rules out a missile attack since the satellite detected no heat from a rocket launch. All 224 passengers and crew died, most of them Russian vacationers returning home. A new book details alleged mismanagement and internal resistance to Pope Francis's financial reform efforts. Merchants in the Temple was due out Thursday, but the Associated Press now has an advance copy. This after the arrest of 2 members of the Pope's Financial Reform Commission. EWTN contributor Mary Shovlain has more from Rome tonight. Mary?
Brian, it's being called Vatileaks 2.0. An Italian laywoman and a clergyman, Francesca Sciacqui and Monsignor Vallejo Balda, were questioned, then arrested this past weekend in the Vatican. Sciacqui was later released after agreeing to cooperate fully with the investigation, while Monsignor Balda remains in custody.
A Vatican statement says the two were singled out based on evidence Vatican police have been gathering since the removal of confidential documents. The arrests come days before the release of 2 new books claiming to expose financial scandals in the Vatican. One is by journalist Gianluigi Nuzzi. He wrote the last Vatileaks book during Pope Benedict XVI's pontificate based on stolen documents given to him by the Pope's butler in 2012. Francesca Sciacqui is quoted in Italian media as saying she had nothing to do with the leaks. She claimed she tried to prevent Vallejo Balda from revealing Vatican secrets. In a Facebook post today, she says, "I did not betray the Pope. I never gave a document to anyone, ever. I can hold my head high. I have nothing to be ashamed of." There's been no further comment from the Vatican on the ongoing investigation. Under Vatican law, the release of confidential information is punishable by up to 8 years in prison and a fine of €5,000.
The Vatican is studying legal implications and possible penalties, saying it will resort to international cooperation if necessary. This hinting to the fact that Vallejo Balda is Spanish and Sciacqui is an Italian laywoman, so the Holy See may have to resort to authorities in those countries if it decides to pursue criminal charges. Brian?
Mary Shovlain from Rome. Thank you, Mary. Dr. Matthew Bunson is author of the first biography of Pope Francis among his many books. He's back with us tonight. Do you have any idea what might have motivated this theft of these documents?
Well, as we've just heard, Francesca Sciacqui is protesting her innocence. She spent one night with the Salesian sisters in the Vatican City and was released on her own recognizance. As to Monsignor Vallejo Balda's motives, that's going to become more clear as time moves on, I think. The evidence seems to be mounting seriously against him. The central figure in this, though, is Gianluigi Nuzzi, as we've just heard, with his new book.
The author, yeah.
Who gave us Vatileaks all the way back in 2012. His motive, his stated motive, is to help reforms, to encourage Francis and to assist Francis in those reforms. Unfortunately, Father Federico Lombardi, the Vatican's spokesperson, is having none of it. He said that the release of these documents is damaging to the Pope. It's also something that is very contrary, he said, to assisting the Pope in his mission.
Are his books accurate?
Well, they're based on leaked information. That's the problem.
Stolenly accurate. So are we returning to Vatileaks, or is this a new chapter here?
It's a new chapter.
Yeah.
It's being called by secular media VatiLeaks 2.0. But this is a very different Vatican now under Pope Francis. He's carrying forward the reforms of Pope Benedict XVI. We've seen, for example, the creation of the Secretariat of the Economy, which is bringing all sorts of new financial reforms. We're also seeing as well that Pope Francis is willing to use the court system of the Vatican. He established new laws against leaks. He green-lighted the investigation into these particular leaks. He's using the courts as well to bring to justice those who are violators of Vatican law, as we saw just recently with Archbishop Wesolowski, who was charged with very severe and terrible sexual crimes.
And I'm sure the reforms will continue. We'll have more from you, Dr. Bunson, a little later. Thanks for coming in tonight.
God bless.
Well, Houston voters weigh in today on a proposition known as HERO, the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance. A coalition of conservative pastors opposes the ordinance, saying it puts women in danger.
Woven into this is a guaranteed threat against the public safety and privacy of women and girls in particular in that, as well as criminal punishment for business owners and others, and ultimately the silencing of the church.
Supporters claim the ordinance protects gay and transgender people from discrimination. Royals fans stream into Kansas City for a celebration of their team's World Series championship. Fans snapped up the best spots along the 2.3-mile route hours before the parade started. Young and old and everyone between, all dressed up in Royals blue. The Royals won the World Series in 5 games Sunday, their 7-2 win over the New York Mets. It's Kansas City's first Major League Baseball championship since 1985. Coming up, a one-on-one with a Honduran cardinal who is one of the Pope's closest advisors. And the cry, "Remember the Alamo," may need to be revised to preserve the Alamo. Today is the feast of St. Martin de Porres, known for his work with sick and the poor. With the help of St. Rose of Lima, he established an orphanage and cared for African slaves in Peru. St. Martin died in 1639. Thanks for joining us this evening. I'm Brian Patrick. One of the Pope's closest advisors comments on the newest VatiLeaks scandal. Jason Calvi is here with more tonight.
Brian, he's sometimes called the Vice Pope because he's such a close advisor to Pope Francis. Cardinal Oscar Rodriguez Maradiaga of Honduras is here in the U.S. to promote integral ecology. That's a term used by the Holy Father placing the human person at the center of creation. Cardinal Rodriguez says the latest scandal is a shame.
It's very painful to know that when you trust people, people is unworthy of this trust.
Cardinal Oscar Rodriguez leads the Council of Cardinals, advising the Pope on Vatican reform. At the end of the recent Vatican meeting on the family, Pope Francis reiterated calls for reform, saying, "It is not advisable for the Pope to take the place of local bishops. I am conscious of the need to promote a sound decentralization." Cardinal Rodriguez says that's based on the Catholic social teaching of subsidiarity, the principle that matters should be handled at the local level.
Many of the responsibilities on the local tribunals of the Church has been delegated to the bishops, to the local bishops. So it's not necessary that everything has to go to Rome.
Here at Georgetown University's law school,
we are the ones created to keep nature, not to destroy nature.
The cardinal dug into the Holy Father's recent encyclical on the environment.
To work for ecology is to work in favor of life, not against life. I am very much surprised in our times that there are countries that are making laws, for instance, against people who will kill an animal. But what about the laws about people who kill human beings before they are born?
The cardinal says environmental problems are not related to overpopulation. He says contraception is not a solution. He also suggests the faithful examine their consciences on care for creation. And Brian, he encouraged penances like using less water and energy.
That's something we can all start doing right now. Thank you, Jason. Australia's government says a Somali refugee will be flown back to Australia, possibly for an abortion. The woman says she was raped in a Pacific Island detention camp. Australia pays the island of Nauru to detain asylum seekers. The first time she was flown to Australia, the government there says she changed her mind about the abortion. Nauru claims she didn't change her mind but was denied an interpreter and counseling. Lois Dean with Pregnancy Counselling of Australia, Skyping with us from Melbourne. Lois, if this woman was denied counseling and she has not had an abortion yet, how might this be rectified?
Well, then, as soon as possible, she should be put in contact with a counselling service where she can receive face-to-face, compassionate, non-judgmental counselling.
Now, is it possible she's being coerced into getting an abortion against her will?
Unfortunately, some people think that the best outcome for her situation is an abortion. And if she has people around her speaking those things into her, then she may well be being told that this will fix her situation.
And couldn't an abortion further compound trauma experienced by the victim of rape?
Most definitely. She's a woman, apparently, I've heard, has had children in the past. She's now in her second trimester of pregnancy. She knows that she's carrying a baby and that an abortion is going to just further traumatize this woman.
And if that baby is aborted, there really is no recourse, right?
Unfortunately, after the procedure, it's an irreversible procedure, obviously. She needs compassionate counselling now.
And certainly she needs our prayers as well. Lois Dean with Pregnancy Counselling of Australia, thank you for being with us tonight.
You're very welcome.
Remember the Alamo. Davy Crockett, known as the king of the wild frontier, died there. Well, he might turn over in his grave if he knew what nature is doing to that iconic Texas fort today. Mark Irons reports on an emergency preservation effort.
The Alamo, which defines the city of San Antonio, welcoming 2.5 million visitors a year.
You think of independence and you think of Texas.
Rich history of both countries, Mexico and United States.
The Catholic mission built by Spanish settlers in the 1700s took on its modern meaning when Mexican troops lay siege on about 180 Texas defenders. The Alamo fell after a 90-minute battle on March 6, 1836, but it marked a turning point in Texas history, independence before eventually joining the United States. But rain and the punishing Lone Star sunshine are doing what cannon fire and Mexican bullets could not, slowly disintegrating the 3-century-old structure.
And we want to make sure that nothing becomes dislodged, that no original material is lost while the longer deliberative process of how to actually restore the facade takes place.
The state has hired stone conservator Ivan Myjar and master stonemason Miroslav Mahler to save the Alamo once more, this time from Mother Nature.
So I'm trying to plug up all the openings which we had opened up previously, looking for, a type of mortar.
A slow, painstaking process.
The most advanced deterioration is where we have the most water infiltration.
The $5 million in emergency repairs is part of a sweeping $31.5 million makeover approved by the state legislature. But the total project is expected to be closer to $50 million.
The Alamo is one of those unique places in Texas history and in a lot of a culture that it's personal.
The Alamo director says the master plan includes revamping the old mission and its surrounding footprint.
It's a value judgment about your own history, about your own past, about your resources, about what you think is special.
It's one of the most ambitious projects since Davy Crockett's day, so tourists will always remember the Alamo. Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, Russia sets the stage for what it calls transition talks, hoping to end Syria's civil war. And we share an evening with a family touched deeply and directly by a gesture of kindness. Thanks for joining us this Tuesday evening, November 3rd. I'm Brian Patrick. Russia, a strong backer of Syrian President Bashar Assad, may not consider it crucial that Assad stay in power. A foreign ministry spokeswoman affirms that today. Moscow is setting the stage for transition talks between Syrian officials and opposition leaders next week. Russia began airstrikes in September at Assad's request. It had rejected the West's suggestion that Assad should be ousted. Russian leaders say only the Syrian people can decide the president's fate. David Adesnik is policy director at the Foreign Policy Initiative. David, why is there growing support for a no-fly zone over Syria?
Well, the decisive event that has changed things is the extension of the Syrian refugee crisis into Europe. It's important to recognize this crisis was ongoing. There's 4 million Syrian refugees in the region, in Turkey, in Jordan, and in Lebanon. But the fact that they are now arriving in Europe has given it a new degree of global attention, and especially the tragic deaths of children like Ayman Kurdi on the beaches of Turkey.
So who is holding it back?
Well, it's President Obama. He's the one who makes the final call. There, of course, is the question of the degree to which allies would support it, but a strong leadership bid by the United States could help move it forward.
We've heard that under 50 advisors and trainers, U.S. service members, will be going to Syria. Can that even put a dent in the situation?
Well, it's not even the same situation. Those troops will be put in location with Kurdish forces who are fighting against the Islamic State. They're really not going to have any role in changing the balance of power between Assad and opposition forces. And they'll have only a minor effect. They may only be a sort of an experiment to see perhaps if additional deployments are viable. But to make a difference, you'd need a lot more.
What is the U.S. foreign policy reputation? How are we viewed in that region?
Well, I'd say there's 3 things that have affected our credibility and in a negative way. So the first of the 3 is the fact that Obama drew a red line on chemical weapons, which Assad then used. And even though Obama said, if you cross that red line, we will use force, he did not go ahead and do that. So people saw him backing off. And that has really left a strong impression. The next factor is the negotiation of the nuclear deal with Iran. I think many of the countries in the region, not just Israel, many of the Arab powers, the Sunni Arab powers, really felt their needs and perspectives were not fully taken into account by the United States. That's hurt us as well. And finally, there's the most recent failure of the effort to train and equip Syrian opposition forces who would fight with the Islamic State. And of course, as we know, despite what was launched as a $500 million effort, only a handful of forces made it onto the battlefield, and they fared very poorly.
What do you think the U.S. needs to do in order to help bring an end to that civil war?
Well, the no-fly zone is an important step because the broader thing that needs to change is there has to be leverage on the side of moving toward peace and a political transition. Right now, as we know, Russia has deployed forces, is carrying out airstrikes. Iran has sent hundreds of its own combat forces, as well as perhaps thousands of Hezbollah fighters who are working with the regime. If there's nothing the regime has to fear from the other side, if they see solid support from Russia and Iran, then having conferences like we are now in Vienna is not going to yield anything. If you don't create facts on the ground, then you're not going to see any changes at the negotiating table.
No leverage. David Adesnik, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much.
Well, it's been about 6 weeks since Pope Francis visited Philadelphia for the World Meeting of Families. It was a busy weekend. He visited a prison, met with sex abuse survivors, celebrated a huge outdoor mass. There was also an unexpected stop, a moment a Pennsylvania family will forever cherish. Our Catherine Szeltner shares their story tonight.
Outside the Keating home in rural Pennsylvania is a swing set you don't find on every playground and a custom-made front door entrance. Inside is dad, mom, 3 adopted children, 1 girl, twin boys.
Who's got something good about their day?
And dog Shiloh. Son Michael Keating has cerebral palsy, a disorder that affects muscle tone and movement.
When Katie would ever bring a friend home, one of the important things, he would always introduce the friend to Michael. And you could tell the reaction. If the friend didn't really respond to Michael, it wasn't a friend anymore.
Michael can't speak, but his family knows he likes Bob Marley music and Elmo. It's a typical weeknight when I visit.
30 goes into 42. How many times?
14. During a not-so-typical fall.
Alaska, Hawaii. The letters are just insane.
The Keatings recently made global headlines when Pope Francis stopped his car on Philadelphia's airport tarmac to give Michael a kiss.
At that point, I just started, saying thank you. Like I couldn't think, what other words could I use besides thank you?
The moment was caught on camera, including Sister Katie's iPhone, shaky due to excitement.
Like right after when the Pope left, every news station was around us.
The spontaneous blessing immediately went viral.
Kristen, have you had a chance to digest all of this and think about the greater plan?
We have a little
Actually, that was what we were supposed to do tonight.
Every child with cerebral palsy is a little bit different, and their needs are different, and their problems are a little bit different. And so as much as you have people who get it, nobody really gets it. And now I feel like there's so many people praying for Michael and praying for us.
The Keatings say they're just one of millions caring for a loved one with special needs. Empowered by recent support after Mikey's special blessing,
all right, Mikey.
The family now plans to pray it forward. Family members created a crowdfunding website so the Keatings can buy a handicap-accessible vehicle. It has raised over $100,000, including a major donation from Star Wars director J.J. Abrams. The Keatings created their own website, michaelsblessing.com, to be a resource for other families caring for children with special needs. Brian.
What a beautiful visit and a great story. Thank you, Catherine. And until tomorrow, for the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. We leave you tonight with these pictures of Pope Francis celebrating Mass today for the cardinals and bishops who died this year. Good night and God bless you.